Welcome back to the ultimate checklist for better photos. This is episode 10 of 12, and today we're talking about one of the most powerful and most misunderstood parts of improving as a photographer: showing your work to other people. Because let's be honest, that can feel really scary. It can feel like you're not just showing a picture, you're showing a bit of yourself, your taste, your intent, your eye, almost like baring your soul. And if you ever hesitated to share your work, it doesn't mean you're weak, it just means you're human. So today I want to do three things: remove the fear around feedback, clear up the confusion between feedback and critique, and show you how the right kind of input can really help your development. And I'm also going to share a story that explains exactly why some photographers avoid feedback entirely. So let's get on with it. So here's what doesn't get mentioned very often. Showing your work feels hard because photography is not just a technical skill. It's an expression of your taste, your judgment and identity. When you share a photo, you're basically saying, this is how I see the world. Well, at least for a minute or two anyway. And that makes you vulnerable. On a psychological level, our brains are wired to avoid social rejection. Thousands of years ago, being rejected by the group could literally mean not surviving. That instinct is still in there, even if today it only shows up as that little knot in your stomach when you hover over that post button. Add to that the fact that most of us care deeply about our photos, and suddenly feedback can feel like a judgment of our ability, our eye for a good shot, or even our self-worth. And then of course there's the bad experiences we all hear about. Like when I once heard a judge say to a photographer, "Yeah, that's the kind of shot I take when I accidentally press the shutter button." Wow, think about that for a minute. The kind of shot I take when I accidentally press the shutter button. Really? So rude, totally unnecessary, and completely destructive. That comment did absolutely nothing to help the photographer improve. Quite the opposite, as you can well imagine. That was all about the judge's ego, not education. And this is why so many photographers think, I'll just keep my work to myself until it's better. But here's the thing. It's difficult for your work to get better if you're working on your own. And this is important, that experience I mentioned was not feedback. It was not critique. It was really poor communication from someone who forgot their responsibility and absolutely should have known better. Good feedback should expand confidence, not destroy it. Okay, now this is a really important distinction, and one I really care about, because confusing these two is where most of the fear comes from, and I can totally understand the confusion. Feedback and critique are definitely not the same thing, and neither is any better than the other. They just do different jobs for different reasons. So let's talk about feedback first. Feedback is designed for learning. It's supportive, encouraging, conversational, and safe. Feedback says, this is what's working, this is what could maybe be stronger, here's something you could think about next time, but this actually works really well. In our Photography Foundations community, we use a feedback sandwich. Something positive about the image, suggestions or considerations for something that could be done maybe differently, and then something positive about the image in conclusion. And that's not to sugarcoat things, but to keep people open and engaged. Why? Well, because when people feel safe, they listen. And when they feel listened to, they're open to learning. And a good example of all this is where 10 of us from the community recently did a photo walk together around Bristol in the UK. We were out doing some street photography. One or two photographers had never tried street photography before, and they were able to get instant feedback from others that had more experience with it, which basically meant their skill level was kind of fast-tracked, and that made their day much more enjoyable, apart from the British weather, that is. Either way, we did have a great way. Anyway, what I'm trying to say here is that constructive feedback is about progress, and definitely not about rankings or scoring points. Maybe you could think about it like a training session, where you're allowed to try out new things, get things wrong, and learn as you go. It's also where you get some happy accidents, at least you do in my case. So what about critique? Well, critique is a different tool altogether, used for different purposes. Critique is deep, technical, precise, and very often expert-led, almost like a forensic investigation. And critique makes total sense when you have a specific outcome in mind, like entering competitions, building a professional portfolio, preparing work for clients, exhibitions, or publication. It's kind of like Strictly Come Dancing. A critique is a performance review, which can be extremely valuable, but only when you're ready for it and when it's in the right context and done by a qualified expert. In my opinion, it should ideally be done in person, one-to-one, and by someone you respect and trust, such as a tutor, a mentor, a lecturer, or a working photographer who has walked the road you're trying to follow. And by someone who understands not just photography, but you, your goals, and where you are on your journey. And for a proper critique, that context and relationship really matters. If you use the wrong tool at the wrong time, you can do some serious damage. A bit like that egotistical judge. He was a right tool. Anyway, bottom line is knowing what you need, what for, and why you need it. So this really is one of the main reasons why feedback is so important, and it's worth slowing down a bit here. Feedback accelerates growth because it can identify bad habits early on. When we're left to learn on our own, we tend to repeat what feels comfortable, not what's necessarily effective. We gravitate towards the same angles, the same focal lengths, the same types of light, because it feels safe. But safe can quickly turn into stagnant and boring. Feedback kind of creates a mirror or a reflection as such. It shows you what you're actually doing, not what you think you're doing. And very often, the gap between intent and the result is invisible to us because we're too close to the work. We remember what the conditions were like, all the effort we put in, the emotion of being there, what kit we used, and so on. The person that looks at your picture doesn't know any of that. They only see the image in front of them, which is good because they're detached from it and they can therefore give you an unbiased opinion. Having feedback actually saves you loads of time, and it gives you plenty of those, now I see moments. Because someone else with a fresh perspective can see in 10 seconds what might take you 10 shoots or more to notice. Like a tiny distraction, a slight tension in the frame, or a missed opportunity with the light. And here's the thing that really matters. Good feedback doesn't just fix one photo. It changes how you see the next one, and all those to come further down the line. Because once a pattern is pointed out to you, you can't unsee it. And that's where real growth and development happens. You feel like you're actually getting somewhere. And giving feedback to others is also a very powerful learning tool, and something I would highly recommend you consider doing. Because when you can say why something works or it doesn't, you're training your own visual language. You're learning to name what you feel, and that sharpens your eye and improves your craft faster than shooting alone ever will. Does all this make sense? Okay, so here's a quick question for you. Right now, what stops you from sharing your photos? Is it fear of judgment? Not feeling ready? Not knowing what kind of feedback you might get? Drop me a comment below. I read and respond to everyone. Oh, and by the way, if you've missed any of these episodes, I'll add a link to the playlist in the description for you. So competitions can feel really intimidating, and they're not for everybody, and that's totally fine. But for some photographers, competitions can be a great motivator. They provide deadlines. They encourage you to edit with intent. They force you to ask, which of my images is actually the strongest? For others, competitions can feel discouraging, especially if you're early on in your journey, you're still finding your voice, or you're taking results too personally. So here's a more balanced view, the pros and the cons, if you like. The positives of competitions are that they can push you to raise your standards. They teach you to edit and select more critically. They expose you to a wide range of work, and they can build your resilience if you approach them with the right mindset. And some of the downsides could be that the results are heavily context dependent. Judging is subjective, even at a very high level. And without experience, rejection can feel personal when it actually isn't. But photography competitions can definitely help you raise your game, as long as you remember that the results are opinions, not verdicts. And the results say more about the context and the judge's taste than they do about you. And here's something some people don't realize. Most judges are not looking for technical perfection. They're looking for intent, as is there a clear idea? Coherence, do all the elements support that idea? Emotional impact, does it make them actually feel something? And consistency, does the style match the story? Judges are also comparing your image to other images on the day, not to you as a person. And that's exactly why a picture can place highly in one competition and not get a look in at another. And this is also why rejection is not a verdict. It's a response to context, to taste, the brief, the judging panel, and the other images in front of them at that moment. And once you can separate who you are from what you made, you can use competition feedback as information, not insult. Now this, for me anyway, is the real heart of this entire episode, and the real benefit of getting feedback. Learning to receive feedback well is not just a photography skill, it's actually a life skill. At first, most photographers tie their self-worth directly to their images. If the photo is praised, they feel great. If it's questioned, they feel defensive, annoyed, or maybe even discouraged. And that's totally normal. But if you don't move on from that, improvement can be slow and exhausting. Feedback, as long as it's done properly, helps you separate who you are from what you made. And that shift is massive. It moves you from being a performer, someone seeking public approval, to a craftsperson, someone seeking understanding and wanting to improve for their own reasons. Craftspeople expect their work to evolve. They expect progress. They expect refinement. And because of that, they don't crumble when something is questioned. They just get curious. They ask better questions. They think long term. And this is also where confidence comes from. Real confidence, that is. Not the confidence of always being right, but the confidence of knowing you can handle being wrong. Learn from it, improve, and move forward. Photographers who embrace feedback stay in the game much longer. They don't burn out as quickly. They don't need to chase validation. They don't quit after one bad comment. They build personal and creative resilience. And that, more than any camera or lens, is what sustains a photographer over the years. I guess that's another way of saying that the photographer and the mindset is far more important than the gear. The gear only needs to be reliable and fit for purpose. So what I see every week in our Photography Foundations community and from my teaching days in college is this. Someone shares an image. They get kind, constructive feedback from other members and me. They tweak the image. They try again. Then they post an update. And the improvement is obvious. Not because they were talented necessarily, but because they were open to listening and taking useful suggestions on board. So before we get into the practical aspect of feedback, let's pause for a minute and recap what we covered, because it's well worth going over. Feeling nervous about sharing your work is normal. It means you care. Bad experiences with judgment are real, and they can put people off for years. Feedback and critique are not the same thing, and they should not be used interchangeably. Feedback is supportive, developmental, and ideal for learning within the community. Critique is precise, expert-led, and fit for specific goals like competitions or professional work. Giving feedback to others trains your own eye just as much as receiving it. And when you separate your self-worth from a single image, feedback becomes information, not a judgment. And if you can hold on to that mindset, everything that follows becomes clearer and easier. So let's try and make this a bit more tangible, a bit more practical, on how to actually ask for feedback. Next time you share a photo, whether that's in a community, a class, or with a friend, do this. And because no one likes a photo dump, share one image only. By the way, do social media photo dumps remind you of sitting quietly and nodding while Aunt Mildred shows you albums and albums of old pictures of when she was a kid? Or is that just me? Anyway, you share one image and you ask one clear question. And the question isn't, is this any good? Instead, ask questions like, does the light support the mood I was aiming for? Is the background helping or hindering the subject? Or does the story come across clearly? Because asking those sort of questions actually does two things. First, it helps guide the feedback you're given. And second, it trains you to think more intentionally and ask better questions. And if you want a safe, supportive place to practice this is exactly what we do in our Photography Foundations community over on School. It's friendly, it's constructive, and it's built for learning, not judgment. So if that sounds like you, come and join us. So to wrap all this up then, let me leave you with this. Trying to improve without feedback is like trying to navigate with a map, but refusing to check if you're still on the right road. You might be moving, you might even be moving fast, but there's no guarantee you're actually heading in the right direction. And to quote George Harrison, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. Feedback is basically that occasional check-in, not to tell you failed, but to confirm that you're learning, that you are on the right track. And when you share your work in the right environment, with the right intent, and with the right people, feedback stops being scary. It becomes a tool, a compass, or a guide. And over time, it's a confidence builder. And once you're open to learning from feedback, the next step is knowing who to learn from, which is perfect, because in episode 11 next week, we're going to talk about studying the work of other photographers. So if this video helped, give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, because it's free of course, and it really does help others find the channel. Oh, and don't forget your ebook, The 3 Essential Pillars of Good Photography. It's linked down below for you. Totally free when you sign up for the newsletter. So as always, thanks for watching, take care, and I'll see you back here next week.